Good afternoon. My name is Raghavan. I play the role of Chief Architect for Risk Audit and Compliance functions at CapitalOne. And with me,
Good afternoon, all. My name is Lakshmi Narayana. I am a solutions architect at CapitalOne. Excited to be here today.
thank you. So we're going to share some point of view on how organizations can get better at risk management using event-driven mesh architecture. Before we get to the crux, a few context to CapitalOne. So we are a bank built like a technology organization. Um, Technology is at the forefront of everything we do. We've got about 12,000 odd engineers. We are all in on the cloud. And we have a lot of great automated advanced DevOps, CI/CD processes, tools, platforms that we have that enables our developers to focus on the top end of the stack. That means our developers churn more features and capabilities for our customers than run and maintain. We recognized early on that to win in the banking sector, you need to be technology oriented. So what you see on the slide are a lot of our technology transformation efforts that we have done over the last decade. Specifically, for a case in point for today, 2014 is when our organization went full steam on microservices. Since 2014, we have been modernizing our architecture with RESTful APIs. We are all in on the cloud. We didn't plan this, that AWS came before us. Today you'll see a lot more references to AWS, how we are using some of their services. But back in 2020 is when we left our data centers. So we are the first bank to go all in on the cloud. So obviously with us getting onto the cloud gives us a lot of advantage in using cloud native services. Also today, we are using real-time streaming data at scale. We are using machine learning and the power of cloud to create intelligent, personalized experiences and solutions for our millions of customers. If you'd like to know more, please reach out to us or check our website. With that, today's agenda, we're going to cover three things. One, start with some basics of risk management. Given that I lead the architecture function for risk management, I want to set the context. Give you some case in hand to think through. And then we'll dive a bit about event-driven mesh, what this concept is, how are we thinking to leverage it for risk management. And post which we'll have a point of view on architecture, how can we use technology to make things happen. What is risk management? I've been associated with risk management for many years now. To me, risk management is the business. So if you are a profit-making entity, it is implied that you are taking risk. So simply put, risk management is the process of identifying, assessing, and controlling the threats to an organization, its capital, its earnings, and operations. When we think about risk management, risk can originate from a lot of sources. To be successful in risk management, an organization needs to have a holistic view, a full spectrum of what are all the risks it's going to take, where are all they coming from. To end with, risk management, ties the relationship between the different types of risks to the impact it causes. So we can cover a lot around risk management, but today we are just going to focus on one element of risk management, which is identifying risks. The ISO standard defines risk identification as a process of finding, recognizing, and describing risks. Okay, this is the ISO standard. Broadly speaking, there are two aspects to risk identification. One is getting to know the data sources or the source of the risk, getting to know the events, their causes and consequence. That is on one end. And on the other end is the actual data. Risk identification can involve a lot of historical data because a lot of forecasting, predictions, permutation and combination we do in the risk management world stems from a lot of historical data. There are a lot of theoretical analysis that come into play because some of what we do is to anticipate what could go wrong. So there are a lot of applied research that get involved. We also need a lot of experts in certain domains and fields to come and help shape, identify risks. And there are requirements that come from quite a few intended parties. When I think about risk identification, what are all the challenges? Like what goes through as organizations work towards identifying risks? There are a few. I've just took some key ones here. You are dealing with a lot of varying sources of risk. Risks can originate outside the boundary of your organization. Risk can originate within the boundary of an organization. Example is external risks are related to fluctuations in the market, pandemic, you know, some specific industry where you have invested is not doing well. So there are a lot of things that happen outside the boundaries of your wall that could lead to risks that could impact you. And there are risks that originate within the boundaries of your wall. For example, I mentioned we are all in on the cloud. That comes with a risk, right? That's a technology choice our company has taken. We have to put measures in place to make sure going into the public cloud is well secured and guarded. The other factor is there are varying types of risks. Types of risks could be credit risk, compliance risk, operational risk, technology risk, market and liquidity risk, and something recent that's come up is climate risk. So there are plenty of risks that you need to factor. When you think about this, the number of sources of where the risk can originate expands exponentially. There are a few other aspects, but I'll just touch on the appetite of risk. As an organization, as I said before, if you have to make profit, we have to take risk. So there is a threshold or an appetite that organizations have to go through to define and say that, okay, I will stay within the boundary. As long as I'm within the boundary, I'm going to make the best profit, but with least impact to my body. These are all contextual, giving the context around risk management, risk identification. If I just extrapolate the terms risk out of this, broadly, what I'm trying to get at is, here we are dealing with a lot of sources of information that we don't have handle on, and that number of sources is expanding exponentially. We are dealing with scenarios where the producer of the information and the consumer of information might not have a good alignment on, because the consumer of the information, which is the downstream team that are impacted by the risk, might not even know where the origin of the risks are. So that is the second piece. And the third is the data. Data is key. When it comes to risk management, it is even more important. Consumers of data that deal with platforms or toolings to mitigate the risk should not be impacted by changes in the producing of data. So there needs to be some form of abstractness. There needs to be some form of thought put in place. So for these three key broad technology challenges, what we are proposing is a concept called event-driven mesh architecture. This combines a lot of existing frameworks and existing methodologies that are not new to this world, not new to many of you, but at least tying these together is a great way for organizations to manage risk. So one is event-driven architecture. Obviously, to understand where the risk is coming from, we need to know what the event triggers are going to be. Obviously, these events need to communicate between decoupled services. Think of event mesh in the sense that it's a very dynamic nature of how things work. So the infrastructure is dynamic. There is a need for sending notification across a distributed environment. Sometimes we don't know who the consumers are going to be. So there needs to be a dynamic nature of routing the traffic. The third is data mesh. It's a concept that is picking up speed. I'm not sure how many of you have read about it. If not, please do. With the expansion of data, I think there is a lot more data than years past. It's very difficult to centrally govern data. So organizations are moving more into a decentralized form of data governance that includes, how can we think about data as a commodity. I know somebody was talking about API as a product. Data as a product has been pretty popular of late. So if you look back in the slide before, I talked about a few challenges. If I extracted, there were 3 dimensions or 3 areas that we want to focus on. So we believe a combination of event-driven, event mesh, and the data mesh put together can get organizations to be better at risk management. There are a few more use cases where we feel this concept can work. It could be around routing and processing. It could be real-time monitoring. A lot of organizations do what is called as continuous controls monitoring. There is a lot of real-time monitoring that happens both externally and internally. And a lot of organizations work on predictive risk analytics. So this concept can be further propagated. There is also a good chunk of compliance and reporting use cases that can benefit from this. So as a lot of institute, ours is a financial institute, so we are highly regulated. We have a lot of obligations to report to federal and state agencies. So having an event-driven mesh architecture could help us get into better compliance reporting. Okay. I just gave you a gist of the business context. Now I have Lakshmi going through our architecture.
Thanks, Raghavan. All right, I think we saw some previous presentation about AWS and some of the event-driven architecture. I think this might gel well with it. So this is our point of view architecture. I think just going back to the event-driven architecture mode, as you all know, these are like key components that we look at, like event producers, event router, and event consumers. A producer is basically any entity that produces an event. Like it can be a user clicking a button, or it can be some an API integration that produces some events to it. What is an event? Like event is basically information about what's changed. It might have additional information about the data that comes with it. The main core here is the event router. This acts as an intermediary between the producers and consumers and helps you direct the events to the right targets and also have a backup mechanism so that whenever your consumers are not available, you can still pick it up from the event routing mechanism. On the other side, like consumers, like they take these events and probably react and also update into their downstream systems. It can be a database update or it can be another API integrations. So how do we implement this event-driven mesh architecture using modern AWS serverless technologies? I'm focusing more on AWS because we are all into AWS, but I think the framework should be available in other public cloud. So the concept pretty much be the same. So I'm mimicking back what Raghavan said, how it actually fits into risk management system. So risk management is pretty complex. Lot of event producers of it and a lot of distributed applications that actually consumes the data. So the point we are making is like, how do we make it more intelligent and more distributed and also more real time? So we have event producers here who can be a risk managers or risk officers, or it can be any other integrated system that comes with some integration here. Like we have identification service and risk management service. Which are like two different APIs that are hosted in different flavors of serverless technologies. When an event comes in from the event producer, it flows into the identification service or risk assessment service, any of these. We have an event router. We particularly choose Event Bridge. It ties back to our previous presentation, especially with queues and SNS and Event Bridge. Like the bridge is what the bus is about. It basically has a lot of benefits. It takes all the events and also has a filter mechanism which you can apply it, and also has rules. The rules can be specifically targeted to different consumers of it, and you can have one or more rules, and each rule can have one or more targets. This is where the intelligent comes into picture. Like instead of a traditional event-driven architecture, now you're actually distributing your events to much more broader systems, and also your distributions can be beyond your APIs that you built, or it can be any of the cloud services, or it can be even the SaaS products as well. So how do we build like more scalable and high resiliency platforms? So the maturity of the platform relies heavily on how scalabilities and how reliabilities. Leveraging some of the modern technologies and serverless technologies in specific, so that we don't have to maintain any of the infrastructure behind the scenes. And also it is high performance, highly available. Leveraging some of the multi-availability zone deployments might help you not to have any downtimes. Getting even further more, deploying it into multi-regions where you have two different regions that are taking traffic. So if the entire region goes down for any reason, you still have a backup mechanism so that you can operate from it. Enhanced monitoring, like a well-architected application should have good monitoring tools, like leveraging existing cloud native tools like CloudWatch, or some of the distributed events that comes with it, with the cloud trials, that might help speed up enhanced monitoring, and also integrating with some of the external tools like Splunk, New Relic might help as well. what are like some of the benefits that we get with event-driven mesh architecture? I think some of the things are like scalability, how we can scale horizontally, and each components can be independently scalable. This might get easier with varying loads and also resource allocation. The other point is loosely coupling. Components are now independent in nature, so that they can expand on its own. They are not tied to any other systems directly, and also helps you manage your code promotions pretty quickly, as these are now independent in nature. You can pretty much deploy it independently. The other core concept is fault tolerance. Since the decoupled nature of EDA handles the failure of one component, like doesn't directly impact the other applications, this isolation helps you to have overall system reliance, resiliency, and also fault tolerance. Obviously, you'll get better responsiveness, as we saw in the previous presentation. Like you got a quicker response, and the following responses were followed up. Obviously, cost reduction. Since we are using efficient resource utilization, it can be system resources, or it can be the developer resources. This can help up your time to market, and also reduce integration cost and scaling. Some of the best practices to consider even during this event-driven mesh architecture is like event contracts. These are all like super powerful. Establish a well-defined contracts for the events, including its structure, its format, and its metadata. This basically ensures consistency and also interoperability between different components, as you are now dealing with a lot of distributed applications. Event sourcing, like the source of the events should be source of truth, and also it should give right information about the state of the event. Observability, as I said in the previous slides, like plays a key role in any of the architectural frameworks. Having a robust monitoring and logging would help like for effective troubleshooting. Security measures like use encryption, authentication measures to have you secure event communication. Leveraging some of the cloud services would help because those things already baked in with security measures. Governance process, like this is very important. Having a good governance process for all the APIs, it's not only for the event-driven architecture, but also having a good event contract, center of excellence can help benefit the overall organization to have common rules that anyone can lay out and build upon. And also a comprehensive documentation might help any engineers to come on board and also understand how our architecture has been built. Yeah, I think that's pretty much from my side. If you want to learn about CapitalOne, reach out to any of us or follow any of the websites.